Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the Brexit purists and the ERG are taking the latest moves towards a more pragmatic attitude towards Brexit. They very badly, they failed to draw resistance to the Windsor framework, and although they're still spitting feathers at the latest moves to soften Brexit, do they really have a plan to do anything about it? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So very much Brexit day today. It's been a bit of a Brexit week, including the stream for this evening. But although the Tories seem to be reluctantly softening Brexit, you get a sense that there's reluctance there. Softening Brexit is nonetheless what they are attempting to do. Like, consider what's happened under Rishi Sunak so far. He's stopped the wrangling over the Northern Ireland Protocol by agreeing a practical application in the form of the Windsor Framework. It's still to be implemented. There is still disagreement with the DUP, but, so there's still going to be political shenanigans to come. But there's no major source of friction between the UK government and the EU Commission over this anymore. And it's quite clear Rishi Sunak has prioritised that relationship with the EU Commission. Some of the more prominent members of the ERG worked alongside Boris Johnson to try and lead a rebellion against the Windsor Framework in Parliament. It fizzled out rather pathetically, exposing both Johnson and the ERG as having lost much of their influence in the parliamentary party. In fact, it was a majority of ERG members either abstained or voted for it. You know, it was only a few years earlier the ERG were able to inflict record defeats on their own government. Now they can't even muster a newsworthy rebellion. Since the Windsor Framework, I would say there's only been one notable move on softening Brexit, which sort of came this week, and that was indefinitely allowing manufacturers to stick with CE certification rather than the UKCA for the British market. Yes, people have pointed out the Department for Health and Social Care haven't agreed yet. This is just the Department for Business. So medical products are still stuck in that limbo, but that will fall as well. When the Health Secretary can be bothered to turn up to the office again, maybe. But although there haven't been any other definite results, there have been efforts. The government is slowly edging towards Horizon membership. They've had to accept reality again where standards controls are concerned. Now, abandoning standards controls is not a good thing, as I discussed yesterday. But the reason why they're doing it at least shows that they're facing up to economic reality. They're making it clear, they're explaining that the reason they're doing this is because they are aware that trade friction puts up the prices of things in Britain and that voters care about that. Like food and medicines. And as I discussed earlier, Sunak is also keen to get some bilateral agreements on labour exchange effectively between Britain and EU countries, or at least for young people. And then, of course, there was the watering down of the retained EU law bill, still a terrible bill that's going to result in various protections and standards being abolished without any public or parliamentary scrutiny. They'll just disappear overnight. We'll be told about them afterwards. But it will still be, it'll be hundreds of our rights and protections removed as opposed to the thousands that the Brexit purists wanted. In fact, you could sort of step back and think about it. Well, hang on a minute. If the bill isn't appealing to people who are pragmatic about these things, and it's not appealing to the Brexit cultists either, you may be forgiving why Sunak bothered with it at all. Well, it's public show. This way, he can say that he's passed the legislation. When Jacob Rees-Mogg complains, I prepared this bill, I want it seen. Rishi Sunak can say, well, we passed it, it's passed, look, this is the bill, it's passed. And it's the same one when, that was put forward by Jacob Rees-Mogg when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Sunak gets to say to voters, we passed it, look, it's there. The ERG ultras can whine about the scale. Yes, but we wanted thousands of regulations gone. But as far as voters are concerned, it's the same bill and it sort of does the same thing, just not to the same scale. But it's a little bit more discerning about how much damage it does to our economy. And then Rees-Mogg will complain, but I wanted the entire economy on fire. Tough, says Sunak and Badenoch. Themselves long-time Brexiteers, because that's something worth considering. Although extreme Brexiteers talk about a Remainer plot, it's Brexiteers in charge. Rishi Sunak is actually the very first genuine Brexiteer Prime Minister we've ever had. David Cameron wanted nothing to do with it. He campaigned for Remain and then promptly legged it when the result went badly because he knew that it was going to be a right shit show. Theresa May was a clear Remainer and went along with Brexit in the deluded belief that appeasement was the way to keep her party from splitting. Boris Johnson campaigned for Brexit, yes, but only at the last minute because he thought it was the route to becoming Prime Minister. He was sort of right. He had spent years bashing the EU as a journalist. He'd also spent all of those same years deriding anyone who thought we should leave. So it was more like, I don't like the EU. Should we leave it there? Don't be stupid. As for Liz Truss, another one who campaigned for Remain, Rishi Sunak is the first and almost certainly the last Prime Minister we've ever had who supported our exit from the start without any obvious ulterior political motive. Mind you, in his case, I think all he wanted was deregulation of the banking sector so he could make more money. It's not really clear if he fully understood the consequences of a hard Brexit. Are the pragmatic Brexit moves Sunak is supporting now, albeit not entirely successfully in some cases, is it how he always would have managed the process, or has he just been aware enough to realise that maybe he didn't understand enough and he's learned and decided that actually I need to change my mind on a few things? You know, it may still be that he is a hard Brexiteer ideologically, but just has to face up to economic realities. You know, we delayed standards controls again because the government understands that it will create more shortages and higher prices. And not only is this counterproductive when their main effort is encouraging lower inflation, but kicking off the process just before Christmas isn't the best idea anyone ever had. And this is an issue that I think we should really push more. See, weren't the Brexiteers all about controlling our borders? Like, think about, never mind what they wanted. I'll come back to what they wanted in a minute. What did they convince the public to want? Controlling our borders. So why aren't we? Even though we have customs controls, we don't carry out very many checks. So very little control over what comes across our border in lorries because we're not really checking very many of them. We've got no standards controls at all. So again, lots of things are coming across our borders without us having any... We're not checking anything from that point of view at all. And it was Jacob Rees-Mogg, remember, who said that standards controls would be indefinitely delayed until Sunak came in and said, bollocks to that, I'm not taking the flak for swine fever outbreak. Only now he's willing to risk it. I imagine Sunak's risk assessment works on the basis that, well, we've avoided a major incident so far and we might carry on getting lucky. But if he applies these controls as planned, the availability of food will definitely go down and the prices will definitely go up. So what do the Brexit purists think about this? What do they think we should do about it? Jacob Rees-Mogg just said, well, let's just leave it. Priti Patel's been piping up recently. She's been whining about the missed opportunities. She said, oh, we had the chance to become a low-tax beacon of free trade. Now, I remind you, she was one of the most senior members of the government who raised our taxes to levels not seen since the post-war rebuilding period and was personally instrumental in raising barriers against the genuinely free trade that we had. But never mind the contradictions in their arguments, they were always there. Their ideas were always counter to their stated aims. In some cases, they're just too thick to understand. In others, they understand perfectly well. They're just lying about their intended outcomes. They just wanted to make a fortune from crushing our economy. What's interesting me now is what is their plan? See, 10 years ago, they had a plan. They had a strategy. UKIP put enough pressure on Conservative MPs, even though they really shouldn't have treated them too seriously. Offering the referendum didn't even stop them getting that massive record haul of votes in the 2015 general election. But they did. UKIP put pressure on Conservative MPs so that the UKIPers who'd already infiltrated the Tory party could put pressure on David Cameron going, oi, mate, do something, will you? But the ERG had their strategy in place. UKIP panicked their colleagues and forced a weak leader to agree to a referendum. Then loads more UKIP supporters joined the Conservative Party, even becoming MPs and ministers, to steer the Brexit direction after the referendum. They made sure that the conditions for holding the referendum meant it couldn't be undone later. There was no requirement for a supermajority. There was no requirement for a confirmatory referendum on the terms of exit. And because the referendum was not legally binding, the courts couldn't interfere if the campaign was run illegally, as it was. They had a plan, they carried it out meticulously. Yes, they also needed a bit of luck on their side in the form of opposition groups failing to take the threat seriously, but they stuck to their plan and it worked. But when it comes to the ERG crowd, it wasn't enough for them to just leave the EU or even the single market or customs union. Remember, there were different Brexit groups and they all wanted different things. They worked together to get us out the EU, but then they all wanted different things. Interestingly, none of them seem to have got what they wanted, even the Kremlin. But the ERG wanted nothing less than almost complete deregulation of the country. They wanted workers' rights gone. Many are going, of course, but they wanted everything gone. They wanted consumer rights gone, environmental protections gone, safety standards gone. I'm not actually sure I can think of a single regulation that they have talked positively about. So it's quite possible they don't actually want any regulations in the country. You know, they thought that they were on the way as well. See, after Labour's drubbing in 2019, as far as they were concerned, they had a decade to make it all happen. They could afford to proceed cautiously, taking full advantage of the frog in the boiling pot concept, and then it all went to shit. Labour got their act together, Boris Johnson shit the bed. Now they've got a year left. They thought, at one time they thought they had a whole decade, bit by bit. Now they've got a year. So they need to accelerate their plans. But their leader seems more keen on slowing them down. And although I keep thinking that the Tories will probably double down on the Brexit crazy when they're in opposition, I don't think they can win with it. So I'm not sure how long it'll last. It may not even last all the way to the following election. They may go for another Ian Duncan Smith moment. It will almost certainly not last beyond it if they get another hammering. Tories really hate losing. And if they get a second drubbing, they will absolutely look at what is realistically costing them, not their ideology. It's obvious that their intended post-Brexit plan has failed. They still clearly have some influence because, you know, our delays in joining Horizon are evidence of that. But it's also clear that that influence is now limited. We only need look at the piss-poor resistance to the Windsor Framework vote and the fact that the incredibly spineless Rishi Sunak nonetheless feels happy to prioritise the economy over the ERG with other Brexit policies. It's like, do they even have a plan anymore? It was to get Boris Johnson reinstalled as leader. That's where they thought it was going wrong. Get Boris Johnson back. It was probably a sign that they were knackered when that was their plan A. But now that that can't happen, Boris Johnson's not even in Parliament, doesn't actually look to me like there's even a plan B. It may be that they just spend their time complaining about their own party now, but without any sort of plan to rescue the situation. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.